the task in becoming, of moving towards dispassion, which is the prerequisite for moving down, moving from here to here to here, is to let that image, that conceptual image, simply be what it is, without any emotional content, without any emotional charge, without any reaction. So, here you are having a, pleasant conversation with, some old friend from high school, and this old girlfriend comes up, and all of a sudden your day is ruined, right? Or something. In other words, you're captive of your passions. And those passions, whereas they might not evoke the same reaction they did when you were 17, maybe the reaction they're evoking now is they're putting you into despondency, into depression, and you start feeling sorry for yourself, and you remember all the hurt, and you remember the anger, and you remember, and you want to punch out that guy who took her away from you, and then you think, well, maybe he deserved her, and her expensive tastes and all of this kind of thing, and and you start, and all of that stuff from the past comes up. And that's because that conceptual image is imbued with the passions. Now, the task is, and what that is, it's a resentment. Right? If you're holding anger against somebody, for years, and for some people, it's, there may be it may not be a really strong reaction. For some people, like if you were really, really destroyed by her dumping you or whatever, it may be a huge reaction, because maybe you thought your life ended when she dumped you. Maybe you thought that, now you're good for nothing, you're worthless, you're not able to, relate to women, you'll never get married, you'll never have a family, all these hopes and dreams and thoughts that you had, and so on and so forth, right? That's a lot of resentment, right? And over the course of the years, and you may not have even recognized it, because most of it was subconscious, you might have really grown to hate her, right? And certainly hate the guy who took her away from you. What it means is that in order to detach the memory, that, the conceptual image of that person, the memory of that person, from all the passion, you're going to have to forgive them. And this is really what forgiveness is all about. It doesn't mean that necessarily restoration of the relationship, because she probably forgot you exist, decades ago. Or maybe you're just a faint glimmer in her memory. Or maybe she built, she built her life on that relationship with you, got distracted, and then her life, went in a downward spiral after that, and she blames you, and who knows? But what those resentments can do is they can completely shape our identity. If you were a victim of abuse, there's an incredible amount of hurt that gets processed psychologically from abuse, right? And what does that do? The hurt turns into anger. The anger turns into hatred and bitterness and slander and all of these other things, which are actually very gravely sinful. And that's not talking about the abuse, the sinful part of or the sinful aspect of the abuser. But what we do when we sin by responding in these ways to abuse is that we compound the sin on top of sin, and it's completely enmeshed, right? And so the task is to separate the other person's sin, and if they abused us, then they have to answer to God for that, and there's, and that's their sin. We can't do anything about that. We can't repent for them. We can't that's their problem. But we have all of this other sin that we committed and that we have embraced and even, if it's anger and bitterness and hatred and all of this other stuff, then and have made it part of our identity, then we are the ones who are totally enmeshed in that sin. And so the only way to deal with that is to forgive that person and to forgive ourselves and to accept God's forgiveness. And to forgive doesn't mean to validate. It doesn't mean to validate the abuse. It doesn't mean to say, it's okay, because it's not okay. Abuse is always wrong. It's always a sin. It doesn't mean to say, I deserved it, because that's the biggest lie we tell ourselves. And that's probably also a sin to say that, because it's never true, that we never deserve to be abused. But it's to be willing to overlook those sins and say, that other person is struggling just like I am. And they're a person who is as much in need of love as I am. And to be able to recognize that is already a path to begin to be able to let go of, to detach from, and to renounce those sinful, passionate reactions that maybe we have been carrying for years and years and years in our lives. And in reality, it's not the abuse that destroyed our life, it's our reaction to it. And one of the greatest traps is this trap of victimhood, because what that does is it's taking responsibility for that which we have no responsibility for. It's taking responsibility for that person's sinful action against us, and abusing ourselves with it. And that's what victimhood is. And aside from the fact that it gives the other person power over us, which is probably the last thing you want in a situation of abuse, right? It deprives ourselves of that power, that authority over our own lives. And so the task is to forgive the other person, forgive ourselves, and to let go of all of those passionate reactions. And we know that we've forgiven somebody when somebody who's hurt us or abused us or offended us or something like that can be mentioned, we can encounter them, we can see them, and there's no reaction. In other words, it's a complete separation of the conceptual image from the passion. Okay, so this makes sense, right? So, now, those reactions are almost entirely in this rational part of the soul. It's where the conceptual images, mostly in the psychological, in the rational mind, are processed. The rational mind isn't necessarily very rational, but it's called the logisticon, if you want, for the technical term. It's what processes thoughts. Now, if our mind is possessed, or if our mind is prepossessed, shall we say, with all of this emotional material, because the psychological doesn't just process rational thoughts, it's emotions, it's feelings, it's memories, it's imagination, it's all of these various aspects of our consciousness that are just part of our being, and which actually are reflections of God, part of the image of God in the rational mind. Because even the body is partly the image of God within us. The rational mind is, but especially the nous is the real core of the image of God within us. When our minds are spinning around with all, with the passions and dealing with all of this other stuff, and we're, all involved in all sorts of other kinds of rational things, not to mention carnal distractions. Are we paying any attention to the spiritual aspect of life? Probably not. And so we're oblivious to the spiritual. The biggest, of course, some of the biggest distractions are carnal distractions. But depression, envy, anger, pride and vainglory, and those are totally self-consuming, right? It's and unless and as long as we're consumed in thinking about these things, the spiritual reality is so far from us, even though all we have to do is open our eyes.